Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Answers from the Lab, where we share Mayo Clinic knowledge and advancements on the state of testing and science from laboratory leaders and the people who are making it happen behind the scenes. I'm Dr. Bobbi Pritt, Interim Chair of the Department of Laboratory Medicine and Pathology at Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. With me today is Dr. Bill Morice, the President and CEO of Mayo Clinic Laboratories. This is our weekly discussion with Dr. Morice, in which we learn about updates in the field of laboratory medicine and pathology.
Hi, Bill. Welcome back.
Yeah, it's good to be back. And I know there's lots of reasons maybe to not be burying yourself in the news these days, but there's been a very newsworthy item for our listeners, which just hit the press last night.
Yes, very important issue that everyone has been talking about, and I think we should as well, because we can talk about what it means for laboratories and next steps. So that is, as everyone probably has heard, the judge has granted the plaintiff's motion to set aside and vacate the LDT rule that the FDA had jurisdiction over LDTs. So
Yes.
A real win for the Laboratory Society and I think for patients and for innovation. But do you want to tell us a little bit more about the details?
Yeah. So just to recap, there were two groups that bought the FDA to court over the final rule. One was the American Clinical Laboratory Association, or ACLA, which I am the board chair, as we've talked about before, and I just got reelected to that for another 2-year term.
Congratulations.
Before this news came out, actually. And then the other was actually, I believe, Dr. La Posada, really on behalf of AMP, at the American Molecular Pathology Association. Both had filed independently suits against the FDA. The court, as they can do, both in Texas, I'm not sure in the same district, but the court asked them both to be moved into the same district and to be heard by the same judge. It was the Eastern District of Texas, the Sherman Division, and so that case was heard. Arguments were heard here, I believe, in early March, and with the hopes that we would have a ruling before May 6th, which of course was a deadline for implementation. And I had a chance, since I am the board chair, to hear both the litigators for the American Clinical Lab Association, as well as the litigator for Dr. La Posada. Arguments were similar. There were some different themes, but essentially centered on the fact that laboratory developed tests are not medical devices. The lawyers, the legal teams were really top notch. They had some really interesting examples of why they weren't, and the FDA did show up, and they made their arguments as well. What I heard was that the judge was very interested in the case, was interested in the science of the case, but we really didn't have a good read as to what was going to happen. So then yesterday, when the court issued its final decision and ruled in favor of the plaintiffs, that is American Clinical Lab Association and Dr. La Posada and AMP, I mean, it was pretty we were pretty stunned, because it's about as big. I mean, basically, and to read specifically from the final judgment, the court vacates and sets aside in its entirety the FDA's final rule titled Medical Devices Laboratory Developed Tests, and then with the code number. So that means that essentially the law, that is not the law. That rule is vacated. And so it's pretty remarkable.
It really is pretty remarkable. As you know, I'm on the board of governors for the College of American Pathologists, CAP, and we've been doing monthly webinars, preparing everyone, saying we hope that the final rule gets vacated and thrown out, but just in case, everyone needs to be prepared. And there are all of these different steps. May 6th, like you said, these deadlines where labs had to start creating all these systems and registering their tests. All of that is now gone. And I think that's a huge relief. It would have been a very, very expensive endeavor. It probably would have caused some laboratories to take down their LDTs, and that would have hurt patients.
Yes. Well, we both know Dr. Janetto, who is leader at ADLM, and also our colleague here at Mayo Clinic. And I think ADLM did a survey, and it was pretty remarkable, the number of labs that said they were going to bring down their LDTs. As I recall, was over half. But and just to remind people why this is so big, right? Just in terms of the other options, the reality is that once the final rule was published, going through normal procedures and of government policy, they actually would have had to do a whole process of comment and rulemaking to actually remove the rule if the court had not vacated it. So there would have been a whole drawn out process, even if the Trump administration decided they wanted to rescind that rule. So it was going to be out there, and obviously Congress is just still in the transition, not getting a lot done. So I think everyone's fear was that we would be in a situation where no one really wanted the final rule to go into effect, but nothing would prevent it from going to effect. And now the judge and the court steps in and basically pulls the plug on it. Right now, in its entirety, we should really talk about next steps. But that does mean that as of right now, it's not the law of the land. It is no longer the law of the land because it was when it was
It
published in
was,
May, right,
right.
in 2024, and so labs don't have to do anything to get prepared right now.
Yes, it definitely changed the rest of the webinar series that I was going to be doing with CAP, which
Yep.
is, yeah, great, great news. Now, I do think it is important we talk about next steps, though. And Bill, you've had a lot of time to think about this, working with ACLA. I don't think that this is going to go away. I think we all recognize that there are some times where really high risk black box types of tests maybe do need some oversight, and maybe there's a way to go forward with that. So what are we going to do from here?
Well, so first of all, before we move on, I think it's important to note. I know CAP had a press release, and I met Dr. Karcher recently. We
Yep.
were on a committee together. They were one of the organizations that filed what's called an amicus brief, and we talked about
Yep.
those before, where they take the time to help inform the court as to why they thought the position of ACLA and Dr. LaPosada and AMP was the right one. And so those are all really important. Again, especially when you have a judge who in this case really wanted to dive into the science of the argument at hand. And so anyway, so really a lot of labs stepped up, and I think that we're all really grateful that they did, right, to get to this point.
Mm-hmm.
But to your point, that doesn't mean that the issue itself is dead. So as the language is written, I mean, basically the court ruled that lab developed tests are not medical devices. If you read it
Right.
through, there's the legal way that that's kind of phrased and positioned, but that seems to be the essence of it. We'll have to really, it's a legal document, so we'll have to dig through it. It makes it extremely unlikely that FDA would be able to kind of issue, unilaterally a final rule like it did. There's not like a tweak they could do. Now, that doesn't mean the federal government has no recourse. They could actually appeal the decision, right? Because this is a district court. So
Mm-hmm.
there is a chance that this decision could get appealed. And honestly, under the prior administration, under which the final rule was written, that would have seemed pretty likely, just because just because that was the position of the administration. Clearly, this administration has been very vocal about wanting to deregulate, and so I think the likelihood that a Trump administration, particularly with Robert Kennedy as head of HHS, would choose to appeal this decision is unlikely. I mean, we don't know that though. It's still entirely within their domain to do so. So we'll have to
Mm-hmm.
watch for that. The other is, short of that, there still is an interest by a lot of different stakeholders, as you and I talked about better oversight of lab developed tests. So if the decision is not appealed, then it's likely that someone might introduce legislation to do so under CLIA. I mean, there's been a lot of discussion about expanding and modernizing CLIA. I know there's a group that's actually looking at some of the existing regulations and making recommendations. Excuse me. So it seems to me that is what we'll have to keep our ear to the ground on. That would be good. It's not that would be bad. The legislative process, by its very nature, engages stakeholders. So I think that's why it's going to be important for labs to continue to step forward and think about what's kind of in the best interest of the labs, of patients, number one, and of healthcare. I can tell you in my time spent on the Hill recently around this, including with Senator Tillis, who's the chair of the Senate Health Committee, Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, I think it is. But so basically, the Senate Committee on Health. He's a physician. He's actually a gastroenterologist, a hepatologist. He voiced that there's still concerns, I think, particularly after COVID, about
Mm-hmm.
Irresponsible LDTs that are out there, and we need to make sure that they're doing, that they are good for patients and safe for patients. So I don't think it will go away, but they will certainly have a much different cadence and feel than it did prior to this, where we just felt like we were really honestly under the specter of FDA oversight. So it was very gratifying for me personally to have the court make that decision, because as you and I were talking about, I mean, the FDA's position was that what we had been doing throughout our careers in terms of lab developed tests was actually illegal, and they had just chosen not to enforce it, which to me is this kind of it's not credible, and it's really not right either. So
Yeah. And we all know all the quality that goes into the laboratory testing that we do and the oversight and the work that you and I and our laboratory directors do. So, yeah, very gratifying. So, I think you and I will keep our ear to the ground and keep everyone updated on the next steps, because I do agree with you. I've been hearing some rumblings through too, as to what next steps may be. So, I don't think this is going to be the last we hear about LDT oversight.
yes, I agree. Flip side is, though, it'll be important to stay engaged, and hopefully it won't be quite so anxiety producing as it was, because
Yeah.
staying engaged with under the onus of having a final rule kind of thrust onto us was not the best. So this, I think, will be a much more open process, and where we can be a lot more confident that whatever comes out of it's really going to be good for patients and workable for labs.
Yeah, I agree. And the stakeholder input will be important. As you said, instead of just having a role thrust upon us, now we're going to have an ability to be at the table working together on
Yeah.
what we really think is best for patients.
That's right. And the only thing I would say is, as you do that, if you're interested in the issue, just make sure you talk to, if you're talking to groups, talk to patient groups, patient
Mhm.
advocacy groups, others. I think it's important to understand some of the negative perceptions that have been created. And I do think this is an unfortunate kind of lingering effect of COVID. We all went through like the serology test when the market was flooded, and you and I know did a lot of stuff. You led our communications during that crazy time, and
Mm.
that when people equated bad serology tests with just all tests are bad. So it's like there is a perception out there that we have to fight. So we can't just sit on on our ivory tower and say, well, no, that shouldn't apply anymore. The court ruled in our favor. We have to really listen to the voice of
Mhm.
stakeholders, and ideally create an environment that's pro innovation. So that means the tests, people can be confident that tests that are good, and then
Right.
also payers will pay for them, because that's the other thing that hopefully we can focus on now, are some other issues like prior authorization and things that make it very difficult for patients to get access to the tests that they need when they're
Mhm.
newly developed.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of communication to do and a lot of listening to do to the consumer groups, to the patient advocacy groups, but also communicating what goes into testing, because there's probably some misperceptions as well.
Exactly.
Well, Bill, thank you for the update. Such an important topic, and we will definitely keep everyone informed as we hear more.
Absolutely. That's our job. And we enjoy it too. It's always
That's
fun to
great.
talk to you.
Yeah, you too, Bill. Until next time, see you later.
See ya.
Thank you for tuning in to Answers from the Lab. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast and tune in every other Thursday for new episodes.